Investors can be led. The challenge you have, though, is that because of the way in which property management takes place, it's inherently quite transactional. Property managers don't get the capacity and the time to actually develop these deeper relationships with their clients. The property management sector is better positioned now to capitalise on this opportunity than what it would have been before buyers agents picked it up. This is the opportunity for the property manager to be the steward and the custodian of the investor relationship and the investor experience. And I'm already hearing that investors are calling up buyers agents saying, hey, can I have my refund please on my buyers agent services that you haven't yet fulfilled? So you're going to get a shifting market, and I'd say the property manager is probably best suited to shaping and evolving that, but you might need to change your business model.
You're listening to the Property Management Excellence Podcast for insights that drive rapid rental growth.
Welcome back. Great to have you with us. Alex Whitlock, co-founder of Managed, director of REB. You're on the PMX podcast. I thought I'd get a friend and a colleague on the podcast today. How do I refer to him? I would say a real estate commentator. Somebody who certainly knows the investor side of the marketplace very well. He has a lot of insights into what's happening in individual property markets, but I guess more importantly and more valuable for this podcast, looking at the relationship with owners and a bit of commentary on some of the things that are happening in the buyer's agent market. The reason I want to bring this guest on is my focal point very much in terms of property management. I'm not a PM, haven't worked in PM, but my focal point is on the owner and the gap at the moment in, I guess, a sort of a trusted custodian of that owner relationship. It firmly should sit in the PM space, but often it doesn't. So, look, welcome to the podcast, not for the first time, for the second time, I believe, Phil Tarrant. He is the CEO of Managed, but wears many other hats, runs for many years, the SPI podcast, and also most recently the fastest growing podcast for the investor audience, which is called Property Buzz. Phil, good to have you on.
Hello. Well, it's good to be back. You must have been struggling for a guest, I think, to get dusted off again.
You know what? It is remarkably difficult to get guests onto PMX. I think people find the thought of being on a podcast a little bit daunting.
Is it? Or is it you? Is it the host?
Maybe it's me.
Yeah.
Yeah,
so
maybe
people,
it's me.
people are a bit jittery about coming on.
Well, the people that I get on, I've had all the guests that have come on have been sensational. Last week we had Brad Beer, who I've known for a long, long time. But just being able to talk to Brad on air about all of the opportunities for PMs to give better outcomes to their owners through education around depreciation. And I learned a lot of stuff from Brad. You know, he said on last week's podcast, and if you didn't get a chance to listen to it, go check it out, you know, that he can often save, or the PM can help coordinate a saving of $12,000 is the average.
No, that was through a depreciation schedule.
Well, of course it is. But I mean, you know, like he's not necessarily saying use his depreciation schedule. The opportunity for PMs is to understand that if you can add value of $12,000 to your owners, you're delivering significant value. And I spend a lot of time thinking about the PM proposition. And again, I'm not a PM. I'm not into the nuts and bolts of doing. But I was just thinking, you know what? I was thinking about, you know, the times when we bought properties in our portfolio in regional areas. And I go back 10, 15 years and we'd pay 10% agency fees. And I was thinking about this just yesterday. 10% agency fees just because you're in a rural area, right? And as an owner, you don't question that. You know, when I bought a place in Hobart through a buyer's agent some years ago, and I saw opportunity. I'm going to go back to probably 2015, where I sort of felt that Hobart was going to start moving. And so when I went ahead and used a buyer's agent, and then realised that the fee was going to be higher, and I kind of went, oh, that's a lot higher. But it was quantified by, you know, to me that that's what you pay in that area, so I didn't question it. But I was thinking, Phil, you know, and I know that Perth, typically those fees are higher. But if you look at Perth as a market now, it's punching at the top certainly in terms of property values, and rentals are rising there. So how comes in Perth now then people accept, you know, paying 10%, and yet in Sydney, you've got some PMs operating at a 5% level? Anyway, just something to think about there.
Yeah, it's interesting what Brad says, and for those of you who don't know Brad, we must have known him 15 plus years now.
Yeah, a long time.
And he's not he's not scared to be on stage or on a podcast. He's from the old days of appearing on Sky TV on Margaret Lomas's show, right? Like he knows
as you used to.
Yeah,
back in the day,
He knows his way around a microphone. But to the point around potentially saving an investor, whatever, $15,000 because they haven't done their depreciation.
Yeah.
I've had properties where I've left it for years without a depreciation schedule, finally done it. And there's ways in which you can go back and sort of get that all remedied. But thinking about property managers and, there's recommendations or even make inquiries around the health and the status of investors' portfolio, I think there may be some fear from property managers to do so. And I think about that from the investor side. When my property manager contacts me, normally they want me to spend some money. So, and I know as the investor, I could sit there just going, oh, here we go. Well, what's this going to be this time? Or I've got a condition report. No doubt they're going to tell me I have to fix some stuff and it's going to cost me more money. There may be some fear or fatigue from property managers about doing that hard work because they think that, hey, if I'm making another contact with them, potentially recommending another service or querying or questioning one part of their portfolio, they may get the ire of the investor because the investor is going to think, oh, okay, why is the property manager doing this? Why are they recommending this service? Are they getting a cut? And
true.
Yeah, I get property managers contacting me and, they go, oh, have you got your connection sorted out for this new property? Whatever. Power and gas, which is a pain to do. And they go, well, we use this company, some sort of connection services. And then you get some connection services just berating you with sales calls, until you just go, oh, look, just leave me alone. Like, just speak to the property manager. You guys work it out. I don't want anything to do with it. But they'll just keep going, no, we can't. You just go, it's all too hard. And then you get this sort of this perception that your property manager is just recommending stuff which you probably don't actually need, or it's going to make the process harder for you.
But here's the thing: look, you're right. I'm not saying anything that people may not already be well aware of, and it all comes back down. So we'll talk about money in a second. I'm a salesman. I learned, and I got into sales late in life, in my very late 20s. So I maybe was a bit more receptive to learn than somebody who maybe goes in sales, from sort of leaving school or maybe straight out of uni. But I'll park that for a second. Here's the thing it depends on when you want to pick something up. If there is already a lack of a relationship, i.e. it's transactional, I have an owner that I don't know and I'm on the phone notifying them that the oven is not working and I'm going to have to spend some money, right? You're then you're just conveying bad news. Right, there's two elements to this, right? One of them is you've got to spend money. The second thing, there isn't a relationship. And one of the things that I've learned, and I can't speak about property management, one of the things I've learned over the years is when there's a relationship of one sort or another, everything becomes easier, right? Now, so yes, whether I've got to phone you up and go, Phil, it changes the tone of the conversation I have with you when there is a relationship. Phil, how you going? I've got some bad news for you. You're sitting down. You can just manage because now we can be familiar, And I have this conversation with my property manager, and I get all sorts of stuff. I've got some old places, 150-year-old places where I've had some significant maintenance to do to leaking roofs and shared walls and all sorts of miserable stuff that's cost me thousands. But the PM in that scenario is familiar with me, and so. The conversation becomes easier. But I'll tell you just something else. So what I learned as a salesman, and talking about money, and we spend a whole podcast talking about this, people every individual has a very different relationship with money. And there is an element, there's a human interaction where you talk about money, where if you're the custodian in that conversation, if you're not very careful with the way you talk about it, people get either nervous or defensive. So when you're talking about money, I would sell to people. That was my job in media, and I learned. Or as I say, I learned. I was actually taught early on by my sales manager, who was incredibly talented. He said, whenever you deal with money, deal with it calmly and deal it with confidence, and don't get nervous. Now, whether that's me selling a very significant deal to somebody for a media package. But in the scenario of giving somebody bad news where they've got to spend money, just grabbing the bull by the horns and being confident and calm and talking about the money and maybe not go straight in at the front end with bad news. Look to, I think dealing with money, not everyone reacts the same way, but I think if you're the custodian of the conversation, you can manage it. It's in your control.
And therein lies the challenge for property management, is that often they're not the custodian of the conversation, because as a property investor, often you'll be introduced to your new property manager on a property when there is an event, and that event could be a regular inspection, or it could be there is a problem. And I get calls coming on my phone. I don't know the numbers, or an email saying from someone I don't know saying, "Oh, there's a problem at your property," and the first thing will be I'll write back and go, "Well, which property?
Yeah.
Who are you?
Yeah.
Who are you, and where are you from?" So the property manager's first interaction with me is, I don't know who you are.
Yeah.
And you're just assuming that I know who you are, and you're just assuming that you know that.
You are probably unusual though, because
but I'd say it's not that unusual.
You've got a lot of properties in your portfolio.
I know, but if your first interaction with your property manager, whether you've got one property or 50 properties, is there's a problem and you've never spoken to them before because of the transient nature of the property management sector, that's going to put everyone on the back foot, and it's going to have a negative outcome for largely everyone, right? So the opportunity for property management companies is to ensure that your relationship with your client is established before you actually need to have a transactional discussion in relation to that relation. You know
what? So because we've got a joint portfolio, and I got pitched. I was actually at the gym, and my phone was ringing. I tend to answer my phone, even though 90% of the calls are people trying to sell me solar. And I got pitched by a BDM for an agency up in Brizzy, and the girl I spoke to was really engaging and persuasive. Now, they got our business in the end, and I know that I get CC'd into. You've got the relationship there because you manage that portfolio, but I got the impression they were there. She was just on the ball. She was good. She actually had a relationship. She won the business. It's the first time I've ever had a PM call me, and we ended up moving our property at the time. Do you remember the property?
Yeah, I think I remember the company.
It's up in Brizzy.
Yeah.
And I can't remember the name of the agency because we've got.
I think the reason why, because we couldn't get someone there for a long period of time. They obviously
she got on the front foot.
I don't know how they even tracked you down.
I don't know, but she did do, and we moved it. It shows how easy it is, if you go in the right way. And then the reason I mention them, I know that I still get, because she had the initial conversation with me, I get sent the CC'd in the emails around various sort of changes and and expenses around that property. The bottom line is though, every property is going to have some sort of overheads and some sort of maintenance, and owners just don't know. They don't know. They live in a bubble, right? They live in a bubble where they always look at gross income, because that's what they deal with their mortgage broker when they're getting finance. What's the gross income? Yeah, it's $575 a week. Great, and then I can tell you that they don't understand net income because it's never really explained to them.
Yeah,
they don't really understand. I know it sounds stupid, but they don't really understand the management fee. They don't really understand letting fees, even though it's in all the small print. It's kind of maybe sort of vaguely explained to them.
People never read the.
They don't, and then they go, "Oh, but where's my $575? How comes I've only got $150?" And then you've got a property manager having an awkward conversation going.
But again, connected in with this, and this is this idea of what do you take away from this discussion? Have a relationship with your investor client before you need to actually either deliver them bad news or do something transactional, or you want to actually add value to the relationship, like with Brad and recommending another service to it. I get, and this is a bit of a, this is for all property managers out there, I'll get a thing saying I'll sign your new management agreement, and I'll go, why do I need to sign a new management agreement? Just come through some pro forma thing with no context saying, here's your new management agreement. Then I won't sign it, because I'll go, well, I'm not doing that because I'm going to have to read something. I don't sign legal documents without reading it. Then I'll send it again 2 weeks later, the next day, and then go, you need to sign it. And I'll write back saying, why do I need a new management agreement?
Is it a lease renewal, or is it?
It's a management agreement.
Yeah, really?
It's re-signing of management agreements, right? And there's just assumption that people just sign a management agreement and not really look at what the fees and things are. And I go,
is this because maybe they've changed some of their T's and C's?
Maybe.
I don't know.
Like maybe they've changed software platform, maybe they've done, or whatever, or there's been a sale in a business or whatever, but you don't always get the context you need it. And I would say just a thing to flag again to to how do you turn what should be a positive, connected relationship into something which has friction is when you do things like this.
Yeah.
When you send stuff through and you don't know who's sending it through, when you send stuff through where there's no context on it, when you're changing things without giving any rationale for it, you've got to make sure there's a relationship, because then, as you're saying in terms of sales, you can actually call someone up and go, Phil, how you going? Look, what's going blah, blah, blah. Hey, by the way, this is going on. This is what's taking place. Look out for it in your inbox. Come through, I'll sign it straight away, right? I don't see that happening a lot in property management, and I'm in a position to be able to say that because I must have relationships with, I don't know, 20, 30 property managers from different companies or from different places in Australia. It's largely universal.
We've been quite transactional and focused on one very small area of the PM relationship. And we're going to take a break. I'd like to be a bit more, everything that we're saying, I think is an opportunity, but I'd like to look a bit more expansively about this. And I'm going to bring you in because I know you've had a lot of, my absolute fundamental belief is that there is an enormous missed opportunity with the owner relationship, and it is the PM that is and should be and can be the custodian of that. And above and beyond that, if you have and own that relationship, your fees, whether you charge a flat fee to your owners, I've talked regularly with Tara Bradbury, and I really like her model. Whether you charge a percentage of the rent, these should be high, not low. And again, if they are low, trying to get them up, particularly if you've got a transactional relationship, is near impossible. We'll get into it in the next section. Welcome back. Alex Whitlock, Phil Tarrant with you, PMX podcast. Really unpacking the we're looking at the transactional side of the investor and the PM relationship. Tough job. We're not being critical of property managers. This is the way that things are done. Owners are a pain in the backside. I know that you would be, Phil. I would hate to have you as a customer. I know what you're like. You can be gruff. You're busy. But hey, and this is the thing I
use a property manager.
But this is one of the things that I say. I think I look at the narrative, and PMs talk about their owners or their investors. And I say this repetitively, they're not their owners and investors. They're Phil Tarrant, who is a father. He's got 3 kids. He's got 3 dogs. He runs a business. He's late for doing this. And he happens to have investment property. You're not an owner and investor. You're Phil Tarrant, right? Even just that narrative and that framing of, I have an owner. Well, yeah, I own a car and I own a bike and I own a fishing rod and I own a lot of different things. Doesn't mean I'm, the custodian of a fishing rod. Sounds like I'm being pedantic. But I think that there's almost this assumption from PMs, as an owner, all I think about all day is my property. I don't. I'm thinking about 50 million other different things. So on a positive light, and this is what is so important to me, is about that formative relationship with your owner, not with the owner, but with Phil Tarrant. It takes, the best time for this is at the inflection point when you win that management, or when Phil gets introduced to you through a buyer's agent, or, however that may be originated, whether it's a BDM, like, the BDM that won us from our, incumbent, fairly ineffective agency, because I can remember they couldn't get a tenant, and that's why they got us the right time, right place.
But to your point, no, I can't remember the name of that company. Right now, I couldn't tell you who they are.
We're a bit different because we got,
and I couldn't tell you who that property manager is, right? So what you're saying is absolutely true. The challenge you have, though, is that because of the way in which property management takes place, it's inherently quite transactional, because there would be an argument that says that property managers don't get the capacity and the time to actually develop these deeper relationships with their clients. And inversely, I would say a lot of investors get fatigued by the fact of, why do I want to invest in creating a deeper relationship with this person?
By the way, what we're talking about here is not directed at property managers. This is absolutely for the ears of owners, of principals. The PMs are not the custodian of the process in their agency. They just work in the framework that they're given. So we are not being critical of people working hard within the framework.
We're talking about the dynamics.
This is directed at people, at the owners, the custodian of the rent roll, because the responsibility to set the culture and the cadence and the systems. You talk about PMs. PMs are doing the doing that they're given to do, right? And if they're set up to go, you've got this many tasks, and you've got this many reports, and you've got this many, calls.
It's inherently transactional.
And you've got, and maybe you're working in an agency where you do leasing, and you're a BDM, and you're a PM, and you're doing maintenance, and you're doing the whole gamut, right? We're not being critical of you guys because you don't have the control. We're talking to people that have the opportunity to restructure the business, and I get the chance through this podcast to talk to very smart, structured custodians of very successful agencies. I talked to the CEO of Housemark last week. Systems based, right? Because she has a system in Housemark that enables their team. Look, they're segmented. They don't have one person does all things, but because she takes ownership of the way that agency is run, it gives the freedom to the people working in the business to put their customer first, right? Anyway.
Yeah, and that's the message, right? To the whoever is responsible for creating and developing the systems and the structures, the infrastructure, the cadence of how property managers operate need to listen to this. And this is that because maybe their KPIs are connected with tasks, PMs, it means that inherently they are transactional in how they go about doing stuff. So you don't get that opportunity to create that relationship with the investor or the client as needed. But inversely, and I hear this universally from property investors, is that relationship swings both ways. A lot of investors just don't have the energy, the appetite, or the malaise is set in where they just don't want to develop relationships with their property managers because they know that relationship's not really worth investing in. This might be uncomfortable because it changes
I'm going to
constantly.
challenge you on that, and you're right. But guess what? If there's no change with the other party, why am I going to invest the time? But I would tell you, human nature tells me, Phil, that if the other person on the other side of that relationship changes the cadence and changes the conversation, if I have a different conversation, a proactive conversation, and so often the conversation is transactional from an owner perspective, right? Because it's the lease has got to be renewed. We maybe talk about some good news or some bad news around the rent. And unless the rent is going up materially, it's usually bad news. If it stays the same, that's bad. Because my interest rates have probably changed. My lifestyle's probably changed. So we have this very transactional relationship, which is it's a low value relationship, right? Very rarely to never do the PMs talk to me about my property in a proactive way. Alex, you've had, XYZ Kendall Street for 3 years. Look, I reckon that's probably gone up quite a long way in value. I'm just going to give you a quick review. That sparks joy in me as a human being, because I might not love my property, but it's important to me. I've bought that property because I want to build. It's going to be a pathway for wealth or for a better life for me. As every owner, one way or the other, the reason they got their property with a PM, okay, in a small handful of cases, it could be an owner that's overseas. They still need an ROI on that, right? And to your point, no, you're right. Why should the owner have to change the narrative? The opportunity, though, even if you had this transactional relationship, if you have a proactive conversation, I thought I'd spend a bit of time looking at your property, Phil. Immediately, ping. Yeah. You've spent your time looking at my property to add value to me. I've got a couple of observations, Look,
this is the future of property management in Australia.
It is, and I'm going to move this now into. I want to be material. So you do a lot of commentary. Your finger is on the pulse and has been for 15 years with owners and investors through smart property investment and increasingly now through the fastest growing retail brand, which is Property Buzz. You've been a commentator. Well, you've watched and in many ways been involved in shaping the rise of the buyer's agent market through your position as a media representative.
Yeah.
There's some bad things happening in the BA market, but I sit here and I look at, even though we talk about some of the transactional shortcomings of PMs, they're quality people. They have this unique relationship with their customers that they can step in. Just going a little bit about what your observations are around the BA market right now.
Do you want to go to a break first because it might be long enough?
We'll get into it now, and then we'll take a break in a moment.
So let's pick up this point, and I think we agree that the opportunity or the obligation for changing the narrative for how property managers operate in Australia is the property management sector. It's not the investors. The investors will be led by property managers.
Yeah, of course they will.
And investors can be led. And investors like to be led, and hence the reason why you've seen this explosion in buyer's agent services. And what percentage of properties, investment properties, have a buyer's agent connected with it? It's still an unknown, but it's less
A lot of people use
less
them.
than 10%, right?
Yeah.
Would be the currency of it all. So the opportunity is for buyer's agents to change the way in which they approach their relationship with investors, and they can lead that change with investors. Unfortunately for property managers is that opportunity was probably stolen from them, and that's a pretty bold claim. I'm going to say 5 to 10 years ago by buyer's agents.
Yeah, I agree.
They had that opportunity and they missed it. It just sailed by. And buyer's agents capture that opportunity to be seen, if you want to have a hub and spoke type sort of scenario. Property managers for this last period of time have cemented themselves as being the center of investors' journey for those that use buyer's agents, right? And from that hub, you got the spokes being a broker or a financial planner or a conveyancer or accountant. So they're on the fringe with the property management sector in the middle, and that would have continued to accelerate, I believe, if we haven't had some of these changes that we've had recently in relation to how legislation might change in going through Parliament right now and everything connected with it. So that opportunity sailed past the property management sector 5 to 10 years ago, but I don't think it's sailed all the way past. It can't be pulled back.
So there's a second bite of the cherry right now with some of the things that are happening.
So the opportunity, I think now that the property management sector is better positioned now to capitalise on this opportunity than what it would have been before buyer's agents picked it up because of what we're going to see is going to happen in the property management space. You made the observation, I think, to Tom Panos, who expressed that observation at your PMX conference last year, and for Tom it was a bit of like a light bulb moment for him, where I think you said to him that it's interesting the investment space because everyone gravitates around the sales agent, the buyer's agent, the mortgage broker. That's usually transactional. It happens at the point of sale.
Yeah.
The one thing which is consistent for most people's property investment journey is the property manager, and assuming 70%.
The point that I made to Tom,
maybe
right,
I'm butchering that a bit.
But the point that I made to Tom was, and it was before he went on stage. I said to Tom, because he's very focused on sales, I said, Tom, sales agents can only sell what is on market. There's only a fraction of the entire ecosystem of houses on the market at any one time.
Yeah.
And if the market dries up, you can't sell what's not on the market.
Yeah.
And what I said to Tom was, I said, Tom, every single investment property can be grabbed by a PM any day of the week. Any day of the week. There is no limit, because all you've got to do is persuade an owner, a dissatisfied owner, and like the agent that phoned me up in the gym that time, called me at the right time, but they put the call in, the only one I've ever had, and we switched. There is a marketplace for property managers. Now, of course, you're limited by your geographic location, but hell, there's so many properties in your location. If you've got a sharp BDM that can actually work a database and identify owners, or even just ring around, right? And because the status quo is that most owners don't value their PM, and I want to be really particular about that. I'm not saying PMs don't do a good job, but most owners don't value their PM. If you get a good BDM at any one point that can promise a better outcome, and we can talk about this on another podcast, what a better outcome would be. So that's the point I made to Tom, is I went, they're always available, always.
Always available. So 1/3 of Australians live in investment properties, and I can't see really that changing that much.
Government's trying to do its best to change that.
I can't really see that changing that much. So every single investment property that's managed through a property manager and or might be managed directly is ready for a transition. So this is the opportunity for the property manager to be the steward and the custodian of the investor relationship and the investor experience. And I think that's playing out as we speak right now. And that sounds good in theory. A lot of property managers will tell you that's all fine, Phil and Alex, but I've got my job to do, and that is doing all this task-based or compliance-oriented stuff. They don't have the time, the bandwidth, the energy around it. When they go, we're going to try and do a little bit more and maybe try and get some sense for how they can support their clients, all you'll get is, again, right idea, poorly executed. Someone from their sales office will call up saying, oh, Phil, I see you've got XYZ Smith Street. Are you looking to sell it? Be like, mate, wrong call.
Yeah.
Wrong call. You know, the property manager should be calling up saying, Phil, you've had this property with us for 3-4 years. We've seen in this market XYZ taking place. I would assume that your property has significant value compared to where it was before. We're going to do this, and you have thought about this. You never get those phone calls.
No.
It's the buyer's agent who's been doing that stuff. They've been working directly with clients saying, you've got this here, you've had this now, maybe you should do X, Y, and Z. Most, and this is maybe quite a contentious claim, most buyer's agents are providing advice that they shouldn't be providing.
I agree wholeheartedly.
You know, they're really going the realms of financial advice.
Look, we'll take a break here because I can see this might be an extended conversation, and we're going to pick this up, and I'll give you a scenario when we get back. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back. Phil Tarrant, friend, colleague, pundit, says what he thinks. Alex Whitlock with you on PMX. We kind of just get here and chat, and I'm hoping that this content is valuable for people.
Yeah.
We don't go outside of our beat. We're not going to tell you how to do your jobs better. But
it'd be remiss of me, though, not to sit here and look. And I just want to pick up the point that you made. I want to be clear on this. We're not browbeating property managers here. We're trying to identify the opportunities for property managers, conscious and considerate of the very important work that property managers do. Right.
The future property management has never been brighter. But
No.
but it's you know, I'm going to tell you the cold hard truth. Only a fraction of PMs are going to rise, because a lot of them, and this is not down to the individuals working in the organisations, because the principals don't see the value. Excuse me. They don't see the value. They don't understand property management. And so the people doing the doing can't be expected to lift that business. Why would they? But you know what? Those that understand and believe in it may go out and launch their own business.
It's a brave new world. A brave new world.
Just go back before the break, Phil. So there's a friend of mine who I encourage a lot of my friends to buy investment property because I believe very strongly in it. This friend of mine, I persuaded him to have a look at buying in Perth about 4 years ago, and he was very nervous and went, and it was the kind of what should I do kind of thing, and went through a buyer's agent, bought 2 properties. They've gone exceptionally well. Yeah. So he came to me, and there's been this great big seismic, event. There's a number of things have happened. There's been, the proposed changes in taxation legislation.
Yeah.
There was rising interest rates, and then we've had some fairly seismic kind of like shakes in the BA world with, one business going to the wall and others, there's just reverberations. Anyway, in the midst of all this, he came to me and he went, he goes, my buyer's agent has just come to me and said, hey, would you like to, so his buyer's agent's come to me and gone, hey, look, we're just looking at the market and there's other opportunities elsewhere. Look, we can find a buyer for the places you've got in Perth, and there are other markets that are moving. And I went, do you know, and he goes, and because he came back to me and went, what do you think? And I said, I'll tell you what I think. I think the buyer's agent's looking for 2 bites of the cherry, because they've got 2 properties that they can flick onto somebody else, and then they can get probably another 2 fees from you and sell you something else. And I say, they've not got your best interests at heart. They've got their best interests at heart, right? And I went, don't do anything. Let me have a look. He's gone quiet. I said, I'll connect you. I said, if you think about doing that, I will connect you with a property manager that will find you high yield properties and they will not charge you a fee, right? So I said, I said, I'll connect you with a PM where I'm buying through my PM.
Yeah.
I've now bought 6 properties, 7.5% to 8.5% yield. And they give me everything. They give me, look, I'm in my particular area that I'm buying apartments because that's what I want to buy. So they will give me the lowdown on cladding issues. They will look into the strata. I'm not buying them off their rent roll, but they're identifying areas because they know their marketplace inside out from a rental and from a yield perspective. But anyway, the point I'm making here is you've got the buyer's agent that they do not have the buyer's best interest at heart. I'm gonna say that in many cases. Not in every case, but that kind of going back to your database going, hey.
I remember we had a chat, it's probably, it's got to be at least 5 years ago, and it was an ethics chat, which we often have, right? And always putting ethics at the fore of most transactions. And it, by memory, that it was, should we go to a buyer's agent that we secured a property from and say, hey, we want to sell this. Do you have other clients that would want to buy it? And this buyer's agent, you know who I'm talking about, I won't mention the name, said, no, we won't do that. So we just won't do that because it's just a bit too opaque, right? It just wasn't. It didn't sit well with them.
Yep.
And I went, okay, that's fine. So, what that scenario just told us is the proactivity as part of a business strategy in terms of increasing sales is to go back to current clients to try and move clients to another client.
It's just turnover.
And this is inherently one of the things that, inverted commas, is wrong with the buyer's agent space. I'm pro buyer's agent. There's some very good operators out there.
So here's the challenge that we have, but I think that we can make an impact through your presence because I want to educate the owner investor market of the importance of the PM. But it's a bit of a sort of a chicken and egg situation because so many property management businesses are so operational and not led properly by the by the principal that you end up with people just doing the doing. They don't have the sophistication or the guidance from the principal to have these proactive conversations with the owners. But the agencies that do, there is this gem of an opportunity where there is this huge gap of an opportunity to really truly be the custodian of an owner's journey. And guess what? An owner has already bought the property. So the PM, look, I go to a PM and a PM's helping me buy, and guess what they do? They go, here's the background of the property. Here's what it's sold for. I'm buying sort of like apartments that were originally sold off the plan.
Yeah.
And I'm buying them for less than they were sold off the plan. And I feel sorry for the person who bought them off the plan, but guess what? That's the reality. They're going, look, because they've already put it on the market, right? This isn't off-market stuff. They're going, this person's selling it. It was originally bought for, for $420,000. It's going to sell for $360,000, right? You've got this value proposition from the PM, but in most instances, Phil, I've bought a property. I go to the PM. Most PMs bury their head in the sand, right? They don't have an honest. Sorry, I'll reframe that. It's not a matter of honesty. They don't have a courageous conversation with the owner, right? A proactive, courageous conversation. A lot of owners buy pieces of crap. Yeah. The reality is, people seem to think, I bought an investment property, i.e. it's a good investment. It's like stocks and shares. There's plenty of bad ones out there. Just because I buy stocks and shares doesn't mean I'm going to make money out of them. Same with property investment, right, Phil? Here's the opportunity for the PM or for the principal to go, I'm going to be realistic with Phil Tarrant, who's turned up, who's bought a not too good investment, because I can have a long-term relationship where I make money, where I become a consultant, not a property manager, where I go, Phil, you bought the property. You're not going to go. If I have an honest conversation with you, you're not going to go, I'm going to sell it because you've already paid stamp duty on it. This is not a liquid asset, right?
Yeah. The challenge you have with all this is who's got the appropriate discipline and qualifications to be providing advice.
Yep.
And this is the big thing. And the buyer's agent industry is completely unregulated. Yeah. And you spoke about,
there's a lot of people that say, there's a lot of people that say things that they shouldn't be saying.
And for those of you who aren't familiar with it, but it's a big story. One of the larger buyer's agent businesses has gone into liquidation for a whole litany of reasons, right? But a lot of things are becoming clear, and I've said this is the opportunity for the buyer's agent industry to actually start airing its dirty laundry as part of its formation and how it's going to progress moving forward. A lot of people that operate in those roles don't even have real estate licenses, let alone any other qualification, right? They're salespeople, right? So for property managers to absorb and to actually be the center of the investor relationship, if they do have conversations over and above typical compliance type questions, is about, are you selling? There's always a selling thing. It's, let me introduce you to the salespeople. It's very, very, very little, or I'd never hear of it, they're having buying conversations with investors, right? So I think the opportunity for the property management space, and everyone uses the term property manager, it's a glib term, right? But there's many different bits in property management, leasing agents and BDMs and stuff. There is no one yet within that property management ecosystem that could absorb the role and do a similar role to what a buyer's agent or a property strategist can do. And that is the opportunity for the property management sector to actually have licensed property strategists
Yep.
within the property management ecosystem that can support investors with these second, third, fourth, fifth, more sophisticated discussions. Look, the compliance still needs to happen. Washing, machines and whatnot still need to get fixed.
Of course.
But smart principals will be thinking about how they can absorb being the center of property investment strategy and advice under the right regimes.
Yep.
You may need to have financial planners.
But here's the thing. But so, and I was thinking about this earlier on in the podcast.
Yeah.
We own and run a mortgage broking business. We have done for some years, and it's very successful, right? But here's the thing: with the mortgage broking business, you have quarterly reviews with your customers, right? Now, you and there's a lot of regulation around advice in mortgage broking, but you can advise around debt.
Yeah,
that's okay. You can't advise. With broking, you can't give, unless you're qualified, give recommendations about where a potential buyer should be looking to go, or what kind of asset they should be looking to buy. Yeah. But you can give them advice around debt, and good brokers have a quarterly review with their customers, right? Now, and here's the thing. Now, all they do is they're the custodian of the debt. They're not the custodian of the property. So, they check in and go, Phil, how you going? You bought, Thames Place 3 months ago. Just want to make sure everything's in. You go, yeah, fine. Thank you very much. Now, I'm reminding you that I'm the custodian of your mortgage. And there's a very good reason, because like a rent roll, I get an annuity on that debt, right? There is a trail commission on that. Yeah. And then guess what? When I get used, I build a relationship with you. Now I'm a custodian of one thing. I'm custodian of the debt, and then, with building that relationship, then I will ensure, hopefully, that when you decide to change your debt, you do it with me, or when you're as an investor, because we specialize in investment lending, that when they want to go and leverage and go and invest again, that we're the custodian of their debt. As a property manager, and that's the wrong term, but we'll use as a BDM, why would you not check in on I have a conversation with a BDM once, usually when they're getting me lined up, right? And then they're gone, right? And the PMs are great, but it's back to the cooker's not working, there's a leak coming down the wall, there's this bill's got to be paid, right? Why would the BDM, I'm not saying quarterly, but here's the thing, right? And I say that owners and investors have other lives to live, but they still care they want to make money, right? There's a golden opportunity for the BDM to have a regular catch-up with Phil Tarrant to say, let's have a bit of a review. Let's look at your gross and net income on the property. Like, the reality is just having
is that the BDM's role, or is that an evolved BDM's role?
I don't know. So maybe it's not the BDM's role now, but that what you're talking about being a strategist and PM, the proposition, I'm not talking about the doing of individual jobs, but the proposition, the opportunity. You're going to have, I've had some properties with some of my PMs for 10 years, 15 years, right? Some of them will be there after I've died because I've got them in family trust, right? My the agency, assuming it, carries on, will continue to manage that property. Why shouldn't it? So there is an opportunity for an ongoing relationship with an asset, mutually beneficial, genuinely mutually beneficial. The value of a rent roll is very significant. Now, the individual people doing the doing probably don't care about that. But the principals certainly should do. Principals
should certainly think so. You look at the sequence of how the buyer's agent space has evolved, right? People are attracted to being a buyer's agent. A lot of them are property investors, and they go, hey, this is I really, inverted commas, I love property, and I'll set up my own thing, right? So they set up a buyer's agent business, and they go, okay, what's next in terms of sequence? I'll set up a mortgage broking company. Okay, great. So that means I'll set up a property management business. They try and get this vertical integration. Yeah. I'll set up an accounting practice. I'll set up a conveyancing practice. That's how most of them, they grow out of the buyer's agent space, and they get
diversify.
Ancillary. These ancillary connected services normally start as referral relationships, and then as they evolve, they become owner relationship or some sort of shared equity relationship. But the point being is that it's the responsibility largely of the buyer's agent part of the equation to find new customers, right? Turn that on its head. You've got property management businesses that already have relationships with investors. That's their clients.
Yeah, absolutely.
So why shouldn't that be the center of the sequential growth and development of how property management businesses can thrive? Now, they may start just with connected referral relationships, which gets a better investor outcome. And
Such
that will
as depreciation.
And that would most likely be the best construct, I think,
Yep.
for most property management businesses. But what you're talking about is how the property management company and whoever's doing this inside of it is actually that investment
and some are, by the way.
strategist.
I'm not being revelant. I know
Very
agencies
few
that do,
are.
but very few are. But they're
few are.
doing extremely well, the ones that do this.
So how do you cultivate that talent in your agency? And that talent being mindset, that talent being architecture, everything connected with it, to actually go out there and be a source of strategic investment
But this is
advice, regulated advice
this is the thing,
for
though,
your
because
investor.
it has to start, and you're dead right, but you've got to be committed. Like just paying lip service to it as a principle, where you kind of pay a cursory glance at property management. If you don't understand the importance and the long-term value of property management, if you don't really grasp that, then you're never going to be able to deliver the value to owners. And you're absolutely right, because to build a culture and to attract the right people and to back those, but you can't. People are not stupid. If you go, oh yeah, we're going to build this great new business. We're all going to be asset advisors. Great. Now I'm going to clear off and focus on sales, and everyone's left in the dark. Well, they end up just, not happy in the job. Maybe just, maybe some people stick around because that's the kind of people they're wired, and then they end up doing what they need to do without any light and guidance. So, the next gen agencies don't just see this as an opportunity. It's at the core of what they do. And then guess what? When you come along and join, and rather than people coming along and joining a PM because I want to go into sales and I'll do this because it's my little foothold into getting into a sales, putting PM on an equal par, I think a higher par than sales. I honestly do. Because sales agents starve when the food runs out.
Well, they're starting to run out now.
Yeah.
Transactions are starting to drop as a result of these changes. So, and again, property management parts of agency businesses are going to become more and more valuable.
And this is our commitment. It's the reason why I launched PMX last year, which is an awards program and an event. And I intend to take this further. And we did this podcast, I get feedback from some people that tune in, and I hope more people join. But it's my drive through PMX to highlight internally to the industry, but to the decision makers of the value of property management, to build a business that's an attraction business to attract people to work in your business, and an attraction business to people like you and me, yes, owners, investors, but people to build a very long-term sustainable partnership of value around honest conversations about property. Phil, people need honesty. There's so much lies in real estate. I will tell you, from buyer's agents to sales agents. Sorry, I'm not being. Sales agents are obligated to. Good sales agents behave very ethically. There is still lies in real estate, and there is fear amongst owners. There is this golden opportunity for honesty and transparency. Go, Phil, the property you've bought, you're going to have some problems with it. Phil, the property you've bought, there's going to be some maintenance issues. Phil, the property you've bought, I don't think we're going to get you the rental that you've been told by your BA. But it's very difficult for the first point of contact with the PM. They usually shrink away from that. It's a very hard conversation to have, Anyway.
Yeah, look, it's not perfect by any means.
We're going to have to round this off, otherwise we'll be here all day and people are sick and tired of hearing from us.
So sort of a conclusion. What I'm hearing right now, and this is for property managers, and this, you've got this intersection of potentially seismic changes to how property is taxed in Australia.
Yeah.
Connected in with an economy which does not look good moving forward.
Yield is going to be more important. I'm bang on about yield, but yield is going to become very important for investors.
An economy that doesn't look good, unemployment is rising. They're talking about rate cuts next year now because of, and that gives a sense to the state of the economy. So look, putting all that noise aside, irrespective of that, you've got this cohort of people called the investors, which underpin a third of the rental stock where people live in Australia, and most of them use a property manager.
I'll just add to that, Phil, and I said this when we were up at ARIC, speaking at ARIC. Investors are hated. Yeah. Like, I'm going to be really. I won't sidetrack you from what you're saying, but this is another really important thing for the PMs to grasp. Yeah. The government doesn't like them. I mean, they tax the hell out of them. They treat them badly. Yeah. Anyone who doesn't own property doesn't like investors. They are the pariah. Yeah. Sorry, carry on.
And they need support. Right?
And the PM can be that person.
The PM can be that person. And look, this all sounds really good philosophically, right? You go, yeah, great, Phil, but like you've never run a PM business, you don't know what you're talking about. Probably don't, right? But I'm coming from a particular angle, and that is my relationship with PMs.
And as an owner.
And an owner. And I acknowledge that PMs do a lot of the tactical level work that needs to be done.
And by the way, let's just be, so we between us have got
many,
30
probably
odd,
more,
40 properties.
yeah.
We only ever use a property manager. We would never, ever self-manage. So we believe, and we always have believed, and always will believe in property management.
So I'm already hearing in the buyer's agent space, because of the seismic shifts, like the buyer's agent sector will get smaller. And I'm already hearing that investors are calling up buyer's agents saying, hey, can I have my refund, please, on my buyer's agent services that you haven't yet fulfilled? So you're going to get a shifting market, but those investors still need to be serviced, and those investors still need to be motivated and supported. And I'd say the property manager is probably best suited to shaping and evolving that. But you might need to change your business model. You might need to change the mix of people that you have supporting them. There is a lot of buyer's agents out there who want a career in property who probably aren't going to make it as buyer's agents.
So I'll tell you
something.
One of the I've got 3 properties with an agency that I know has got in excess of 3,000.
Yeah.
Right. Why would you not go to those 3,000 owners / investors and A, talk to them about forthcoming changes and how it might impact them, B, talk to them about the impact of the economy and interest rates, and C, you've got a bit of fallout through the buyer's agent, and then ask, are you buying? Look, as a valued customer, are you buying? Would you like to have a conversation?
Why wouldn't you do that?
Why wouldn't you do that? Because, but
they're all qualified. They're an investor.
You've got 3,000 owners. And with other agencies with sort of 400 and hundreds. There's just this. There is a massive opportunity, and they're all investors. Now they may not be investing in that. Obviously, property management generally is localized. You've obviously got franchise groups, but they're usually localized to one particular suburb or network of suburbs in a particular area. Yeah. But you may have people that are looking to buy in other markets, but they still have a property with you. But there's a value in a relationship that is not yet being capitalized on. I think I would summarize.
You got to work out how you're going to exploit it and execute on it. And for a lot of people, it's going to be hard. But that's why people tune into the PMX podcast, no doubt.
Phil, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
No worries.
For everyone else, thanks so much for tuning in. Really love having you with us. I hope you value the areas that we try and cover. Look, I try and give a broad scope of either, showcasing people that I believe that I have an opportunity to talk to in the marketplace that are doing great things, then also thought leaders like Phil. Thanks for joining us. We'll catch you next week.
The information featured in this podcast is general in nature and does not take into consideration your financial situation or individual needs and should not be relied upon. Before making any investment, insurance, tax, property, or financial planning decision, you should consult a licensed professional who can advise whether your decision is appropriate for you. Guests appearing on this podcast may have a commercial relationship with the companies mentioned.